an idea and blowing it into an extreme, and then using it to capture and control other people. It has to somehow relate to what people care about, or they wouldn't care about the ideology, right? It has to somehow touch their values that are of emotional importance to them. But then it blows everything up to an extreme, and it departs from any other values or truths, and just monomaniacally drives people in a certain direction, usually over the cliff, right? The Pied Piper images and all the others like that we've had through history. So here, Tolstoy in the 1800s is writing about the people who see good, who see truth, but all around them, when they try to embody it, when they try to put it in practice, they're pushed back by evil, by falsehood, by ideology. And this is often, War and Peace is about Napoleon fighting the Russians who were fighting this group and another group, and all these ideologies, which end up being masks for people with big egos like Napoleon.
And Gilgamesh.
Right, absolutely right. Gilgamesh didn't even have time for an ideology. He was so busy being a jerk, but that's what's behind every ideology. The narcissists, the people who it's bloated ego out of control, and they want to have control over other people. And so you get your Jim Jones in Guyana, you get your cults, you get your political movements that aren't for the sake of human flourishing, but are for the sake of the egos who launch those movements. So we're in a time where, and the book that you asked me to read, Andy Norman's book, had a lot of good things to say about this, using a metaphor of the immune system, the human immune system, and invading viruses, invading ideas. It was a great metaphor. I had to part company with him in a couple of ways, that he treats every religion as an ideology. And no, it's when religion gets out of control, it becomes an ideology. It's what I call the double power principle. And you've heard me talk about this before. The more power something has for good, the more it also has for ill or harm. It's up to us how we use it. Same thing with any religion or philosophy. The pragmatist is the person who tries to use organizations for good only, and tries to avoid those harmful or ill implications that can come from that same power. Andy also had a professor's theoretical answers to these questions. Okay, how do you get people out of this? Well, I can imagine him trying to get the Fox News watchers, and sorry to use that as an example, get them to sit down and reason with him and answer his questions. No. My friend who calls on restaurants in the area here in southeastern North Carolina, he says that certain shows are on the TV set in the bars and restaurants 24/7. And it happens to be Fox News. And everybody's just mesmerized with this. They don't want to critically analyze what they're hearing. They're more like they're watching a football game, rooting for their home team. And Andy wants to pull these folks away and say, and let's do some creative dialogue, some critical dialogue about this. It's a great idea. How's it going to happen? Is there an alternative that's more practicable, that's more viable?
Well, that's a funny part too, because I've shared with you my love of my brother and my respect for him. And I talk about him on my podcast all the time because he's a thinker and a writer and an academic and a law professor and a family law attorney. And most of the stuff I study in my free time, I read a couple books a week, and Andy's was one. And he said to me one day, he said, you read a lot of white dudes. I was like, true. I do have some favorite female writers, but it has recently been skewed male and white and educated. And so Andy's purview of the world, specifically as he framed pragmatism and some of the questions that I think are relevant to our chat today, are framed in a way that is of the privilege. So people actually have time to sit back and pontificate on, hey, what can we do to solve these problems? And as you know, I launched this podcast earlier this year after I wrote my memoir. And my memoir was a big mea culpa about being a douchebag, right? So I thought it was just one of those things where, and thank you again for all your help there, but the idea of